Welcome to our next segment of book reviews that nobody asked for. Last time it was The Golden Girls, Good Night Girls. This week it is going to be Rejoice, the Free Will Baptist Hymnal. As a disclaimer, I am no longer a Free Will Baptist and have not been since 2016, but I do still have the hymnal. And so I thought, what's a book review that nobody asked for? Well, definitely a hymnal, and definitely a Free Will Baptist hymnal, which is not a very common denomination. So this is the Rejoice Free Will Baptist Hymnal, 2nd edition, put out in 1995. There are 728 entries, and I do say entries because anybody familiar with the hymnal will know that not everything in the hymnal is a piece of music. There are also scripture readings, and there are also responsive readings. And so there are 728 entries in this particular hymnal, with the first one being Rejoice, the Lord is King, which is fitting with the title being Rejoice, and the final entry being a selection of manifold amens, specifically the Geneva, the twofold, the threefold, and the sevenfold, if you know anything about the amens in musical hymnage. Is hymnage a word? Hymnage is a word now. One thing that's helpful about this particular hymnal is the sheer number of indices that you have to be able to search things. They have an alphabetical index of scripture readings, they have a topical index of scripture readings, a scriptural index of scripture readings, an index of scriptural allusions in hymns, which is a fancy way of saying what scripture is this hymn based on. We have an alphabetical index of tunes. Those of you that know hymns will know that not all the time is the tune the name of the hymn, nor is the tune always specifically designed for the poem that the hymn is based on. A classic example being What Child Is This?, which is a very popular Christmas carol. The tune is Greensleeves, which was invented well before the poem What Child Is This? And the poem was then put to the music. So an alphabetical index of tunes is also somewhat useful. They have a metrical index of tunes. That's because of contrafraction, I believe is the musical term. That means that so long as the poem has the same meter as another poem, it can be put to a corresponding tune. An instance, for example, would be Pokemon's theme. I'm talking the original Pokemon show, and Amazing Grace. What do I mean by that? We have Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, right? And then you have I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. Contrafraction states that those have the same meter so that you can flip the tune with the words. For instance, I want to be the very best, like no one ever was. And likewise, we have Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. And that's the beauty of having contrafraction, things that can flip on each other. So that's what the metrical index of tunes is for. We also have the index of authors, composers, sources, translators, and arrangers, self-explanatory. The topical index of hymns for planning a service with hymns around a specific theme. And finally, what most people would look for in an index, the alphabetical index of hymns, which I have a qualm with, which I'll mention here in a second. For your basic layout, you could really use any hymn in here for the basic layout, but we're going to use 233. Which is Wonderful Grace of Jesus. There's a couple reasons we're going to do that. So as you see here, they all have the title at the top and what hymn number it is. Under that, in that small print there, is the verse that hymn is based on. You'll see that all of the hymns are in 4-part harmony, except for a few exceptions of some contemporary hymns that do not have the 4-part harmony written in them, although contemporary hymns are rare in the Rejoice Free Will Baptist Hymnal. At the bottom, they have the author and year. They also have the particular categorical theme that it belongs to. So for this one, it's the Gospel and Grace. Here is the tune's author and that information. You'll see this one is 2 pages. You'll also see that if there's a bass line that has differing lyrics than the melody line, they are written beneath the melody line. So for instance, those of you familiar with Wonderful Grace of Jesus, that would be the melody line, Wonderful the matchless grace of Jesus. And when we get to that, of Jesus, the bass line is the matchless grace of Jesus. And that's what's written in there. So they're not all 2 pages, but all of the hymns in this hymnal follow this basic format. Pretty organized, pretty standard for a hymnal. We won't talk too much about that. So let's talk about things I like. They do try to put theme hymn categorizations together. So for instance, all of the Christmas songs are together, all of the Easter songs are together, etc. You saw at the bottom that they have a category that the hymn belongs to, and they try to keep all those categories together. So that's nice. Each hymn also has a scriptural reference for relevancy of scriptural-based worship, which is important especially to Protestant congregational assemblies. They like to know what scriptures their hymns are based on, so I like that about this hymnal. Things I dislike. All of the scriptures are in King James Version. Those of you that are Free Will Baptist or were Free Will Baptist are familiar with why it's King James only. That was quite the controversial issue for a long time in the Free Will Baptists, and the fact that this particular edition is from 1995, it's all in King James, which I don't particularly like. If you didn't grow up in the church or you're not a Shakespearean scholar, King James is not very accessible. And the whole point is for the scripture to be accessible, so I'm not a fan of it being King James only. I'm also not a fan of the fact that there are patriotic entries in this hymnal. That is not unique to Rejoice the Free Will Baptist hymnal. Several hymnals will do this. In this particular hymnal, it's 708, 709, 710, and 712, which are America, O Canada, and the Star-Spangled Banner. My issue is that Christianity is supposed to be a transnational, trans-ethnic, trans-cultural religion, and as such, nationalism has no place. And so it's my personal opinion. Again, this is book reviews nobody asked for, so it's my personal review. Patriotic entries have no place in a hymnal. You have some interesting exceptions, like Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is hymn 714 in this hymnal, which technically was originally politically charged because it was used by the Union during the American Civil War. And so there's a history behind that hymn. However, most of that hymn focuses on God and his truth. It marching on, right, being one of the main refrains of the song. So I could see an argument one way or another as to whether or not it's a political entry. I personally like the hymn. Is it a patriotic entry and therefore I don't think it belongs in the hymnal? I'm not sure on that one. The others are pretty cut and dry, though. The other issue I have with this hymnal, anybody that does categorization and organization for libraries knows that any definite articles are not included in your alphabetization. So for instance, the, a, and an. This hymnal, however, in their alphabetical index of hymns, anything that starts with the, which those of you are familiar with hymns know several of them start with the, they will categorize it as the, whatever comes after it. Those of us that know organization, that drives me nuts because that's a big no-no rule in organization and categorization and alphabetization and how we normally handle things. Usually you omit the article, they do not. A bit nitpicky, I will admit, but it drives me nuts. As far as an overall rank, this is, after all, book reviews nobody asked for, so I need to give it a rank. I would give it a 7 out of 10. It gets points off for being King James only. It gets points off for having patriotic entries. I would have given it a 6.5, but it does contain the Lord's Prayer, which is hymn 586 in this hymnal, and any self-respecting compendium of Christian music should contain the Lord's Prayer, in my opinion. Most denominations say it, some say it weekly, but all denominations say it and recognize it as important, so why would you not have the musical version? Plus, it's just a pretty hymn. So it went from a 6.5 to a 7 because it does contain the Lord's Prayer. So that's been the book review nobody asked for of Rejoice, the Free Will Baptist Hymnal, 2nd edition, 1995. Please put in the comments if there is a book review nobody asked for you would like. Remember, I'm looking for obscure stuff that is not normally reviewed. I'm not looking for your Harry Potters or your Lord of the Rings or anything like that. So please like and comment if you're interested in a book review that nobody asked for. And I hope you all have a great day.